recipient witnesses to some of the limited events here. Unfortunately, I think we're somewhat prejudiced in our ability to really, when you have a general claim, it can't be refuted generally. And we will not, we've made a conscious decision that to follow the spirit of the chair's admonition before, is we are not going to recognize or repudiate what is hearsay evidence, which is not recipient witness evidence. What somebody had said, I don't think is evidence worthy of this board, and we will not be addressing it. I think, given the nature of the claims here, the context of what was going on at the Housing Authority was very important. Some people have spoke to it. Rather than belabor that with a lot of oral testimony, I will offer what I think is kind of a summary document, which is a public document with the Housing Authority, which is a March 30th, 2018 correspondence from Sue Honeycutt of Ewald & Associates. That's the accountant for the authority to the OCD, DCD, the state authority which manages this. I brought one to put in the record and a series of copies for you. And what this does in a very concise form, which I think will give the board complete context of the grave and serious financial improprieties which were going on at the board and with the authority at the time Ms. Smith and her colleagues went into office. As you know, just to make the record clear, I think it's been referenced, this board appointed Ms. Smith in November of last year, almost a year ago, and then she was elected by the people, their constitutional right and their vote to decide who would be on the Housing Authority. And it's that right that you're looking that they're asking you to unseat right now, is the right of the voters to decide. And the context of this, I think, is important because what you've heard a lot today is strong policy differences with Ms. Smith. Policy differences are fine. And strong personality differences are fine. So I wanted to just share that with you to give you context of the strong policy issues which are undercutting some of the interactions. With that, I'd first like to call Jim Mercer to give his account both of the events in Ms. Luber's complaint and a general response to the characterizations in Ms. Kodaleski's complaint.
Good evening. My name is Jim Mercer. I am Vice Chair of the Great Barrington Housing Authority. Karen, as well as Diane Dillon and Jackie Sinico, we were all appointed in November of last year. I haven't known Karen that long, but at the time that I have known her, I've known her to be very honest, straightforward, very clear. She's not sugar-coated. Over the years, she's worked very hard with different committees within the community. She worked with children and the elderly. She has a long history of service to the town. She's very sensitive to the issues and the quality of life issues within the town. And I know, working with her on the board at the Housing Authority, she's very sensitive to the elderly and the other residents at the Housing Authority, at the property. One of the residents recently called me. She felt very bad about just all the animosity going on within the Housing Authority at this point. And she said, Karen's my favorite ninja. She says she gets things done. There was a vacuum a year ago at the Housing Authority. There was a weak board. Everything was in disarray. Things weren't getting done. There was maintenance issues, a lot of ongoing issues that had been unaddressed. When Karen came on the board, when we appointed her as chair, she's very task-oriented. She was asked to do something, she gets it done. There were concerns about maintenance, we started addressing maintenance. One of the issues that was very concerning to all the residents was that there wasn't really a forum for tenants to address their concerns. So she created a tenant advisory board. There were members from each of the 3 Housing Authority properties represented. They were put on the agenda every month, and concerns that they had were brought before the board and addressed promptly. It gave residents a platform and a voice. Everything was going along pretty well until we started having concerns from the fee accountant that some of the paperwork for the state wasn't being filed properly. Then we got a real wake-up call on June 8th when we received a letter from the state, the Department of Housing and Community Development. They did a letter report. It was titled Concerns Regarding Management and Operations. There was a list of deficiencies. This is a public record which anyone can look at, and you'll see the laundry list of deficiencies that needed to be addressed. Karen and the board worked together to sort these out. It wasn't a pleasant thing to do. There's an awful lot to do, but we did it. One quick story to finish. Karen called me just before Thanksgiving. She was concerned because one of the local churches was not providing meals to some of the residents like they had in the past. She said, "Can you check on these people? Can you check to make sure that everybody has a Thanksgiving dinner?" She really cares about the tenants at the property. And this is the kind of person she is. She's a very caring individual with an armadillo exterior. She's not a bully. She's not a bully. I can certainly answer any questions anyone has.
We'll address it after all.
Okay, I just asked you to address the incident following the Housing Authority meeting involving Ms. DeBear, what you saw and what you heard while you were there.
After that meeting, I was actually in the director's office there making copies of the resume for distribution to the press. And it was within 15 feet, and I saw that there was a ruckus, and I heard, I didn't hear all of it, I heard Michelle yell, "Don't assault me." And everyone was standing around there, and I didn't really know what was going on, and then it was over. I didn't see anybody touch anyone. I heard a loud voice. That's all I heard. And I can tell you right now, if anyone was assaulted, with 2 reporters standing right there, that would have been front page in the paper. There was an article written the next day. It had no mention of any sort of confrontation or anyone being treated poorly. I was there for that portion.
Excuse me, Chair. Excuse my interruption. Could I be able to comment on that after Mr. Evans' comments?
Next.
At this point, we'd like to call Karen Lewis to testify with regard to both the incident in Ms. LeBear's claim and the very vague reference to nepotism.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name's Karen Lewis, and I work at the Housing Authority. I began in May of this year, 2018. I haven't prepared a formal statement. I'm not as used to public speaking as some of the people before me are. So, in regards to nepotism, which if you take the definition on face value, I'm certainly not related to Ms. Smith. She is a friend of mine, a longtime friend, and at the time there was a position come to open at the Housing Authority. It was a part-time position, 12 to 15 hours a week of applications processor, and the funds were approved in a time I happened to be out of work because I had some physical issues, and I moved into actually property which is owned by my former employer, Construct. I worked at Construct in the housing services industry for 18 years, and there's a conflict of interest if I'm a tenant and an employee of the same organization there. So I needed physically to move into Construct's property, and so therefore I was at work. Ms. Smith did refer me to Vera Cartier, and just simply because I had this 18 years of experience of work at Construct. And Vera reached out to me. I have emails with me. She reached out to me telling me of this position and asking me was I interested. So I emailed her back indicating my interest. I sent her a resume and a letter of interest. I have the resume with me. I also have a master's degree. And we arranged for an interview on the date of February 22nd. Now at the time, Ms. Smith was not even in the country. So it's very far-fetched that she had anything to do with Vera hiring me other than referring. I did go back for a second interview on March 15th. I have copies of the dates written in my date book. We had a second interview because Vera wanted to make sure I was okay with the fact that time was passing and would I still be available. And we shook on my hiring, good old-fashioned handshake. And then I received in the beginning of May an email from Vera, would I be interested in working in the office at Flag Rock for a few hours a week. And so I started there with a few hours a week and signed on to work as their office clerk, which I'm still employed there at 16 hours a week now. So that's the story of my hiring at Great Barrington Housing Authority. And I also was present in the office during the alleged interaction between Ms. LeBaron and Ms. Smith. And there was an interaction, but from what I saw, there was nothing physical about it. I was seated at a desk, which looks out at the half door, and I heard Karen's voice raised, and I don't recall what she said, but I looked up, and I saw Ms. LeBaron, and Karen Smith was not even anywhere in sight of her. She must have been, from the sound of her voice, maybe 5 to 10 feet away. And I heard Ms. LeBaron taunt her, saying, "You better be careful, Karen, there's press here." And I didn't see any physical interaction at all. And given the exaggeration of that incident, it leads me to believe that many other things have been exaggerated also, things that I have no first-hand knowledge of. And that's my testimony. Questions?
We'll do those.
Okay.
You know, I have two questions for Susan.
Are you going to make a closing statement?
No, I'm going to have Karen this way, but you folks don't have questions for Ms.
We'll do the questions at the end of all the testimonies.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so at this point, we'll have Ms. Smith speak on her own behalf.
Good evening. My name is Karen Smith. I'm chair of the Great Barrington Housing Authority. Let's just say this is not an optimal way to spend tonight's tonight, but we'll do it. When I was recruited to get on the Housing Authority Board last October by Vera Cartier and Polly Mann, they had explained that they had had an interim, a guy named John Height, and that they had hired a woman by the name of Vera Cartier. And Vera was there, and she said, we have things we need to do. And so we were appointed. I think there are a couple of things I want to overview of this. Number one, the board for the Housing Authority is responsible to ensure that policies, procedures, and long-term financial viability is maintained for that facility so that it is not only there for the people that are there now, but the people who may need it in the future. I think one of the things that a lot of what has been discussed about Vera and whether she was there, she was not fired. There was a mutually agreed upon separation agreement signed, which I am legally bound not to discuss any of the rationales that went behind it. Also, her separation was done by rule, by procedure, as advised by the DHCD attorney, James Pender. So, any questions of being fired was not. It was a mutually agreed upon separation agreement that Ms. Cartier entered into, as we did, and was board approved. All of what went on from November until the beginning of May, when I got a call from the state saying, we need to meet with you and the state appointee, we have things we need to review, Diane Dillon. Diane couldn't be there, so she phoned in. And we sat for 2.5 hours and listened to the state go on about deficiencies, some of which we had no understanding of. We had never been made aware of. For instance, the email that you got that was sent from the fee accountant to the state, the board was not even in receipt of that until September 11th. We were never copied on any of it until September. The state went through this whole list of deficiencies, and I said, great, can you please send us a report? I mean, can we have a paper document? Well, it took, I think, about 6 weeks before the deficiency letter was dated, I think, June 8th. I think it arrived sometime, probably 5 or 6 days later. And there it laid out a bunch of deficiencies. In April, we had a meeting with the accountant who never shared any of this stuff with us. We were never heard that there was difficulties around it, although we kept it requiring. And it reflects in the minutes that we kept saying, where are all the financial things? The issues that came up at the April meeting, the board voted to approve Vera's contract. That was pre this deficiency notice. When we got the deficiency notice, we were then told that the state would not approve her contract, and that we should do a performance review right there, right then. And I said, we're not doing that. We're going to give her some time to remediate, which we did. So I think that's important that that's stated. The other thing is the last board evidently did not let tenants speak. Jim alluded to the whole thing about a resident advisory board to get them as part of, because it is their home, and it is things that they need to be involved in. I want to explain this issue. There are 2 issues that I'm aware of, and I'm going to explain them. In April, Ms. Loubert, in the May meeting, we were trying to find out what was going on with minutes. And what happened at the May meeting, which was after her resignation, the recorder that was used by the director, she didn't push the button. So the meeting was not recorded, the May meeting. And I found that out 3 days later. At that point, I asked everybody for notes. Vera didn't have any notes. Ms. Mooney had notes, and actually worked with me for, I don't know, a couple hours, trying to recreate the minutes, because we didn't have them. Mr. Mercer, myself, we finally got some minutes together, and we got it done. So in the interim, I had said to Vera, make sure you go get a recorder and you understand how to use it. It's really important. It's usually on, off, play, start, delete, whatever, something along that line. At the June meeting was over. I said to Vera, so let's see what we got. And she goes, well, I don't know how to use it. I immediately started to get angry. I said, what do you mean you don't know how to use it? I told you to buy it to figure it out. It's got 3 buttons. Why don't you know how to use it? I took the recorder, I pushed the play button, I listened for 30 seconds. It was dead air. Yes, I did. I was upset because I was darned if I was going to have to recreate another set of minutes. I slammed my hand on the table. She said, I don't like being yelled at. And I said something, I don't like that you didn't follow the basic instructions. And I left. You can't slam the door in the community room at the housing authority because there's no jam. but I would suggest that it was not closed gently. I walked out. The second issue that they're talking about, this woman who I supposedly slammed the door in her face, which is not accurate. I did not do that. I was meeting with Vera. I had a standing meeting Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock, where I would meet with her as board chair, and we would go over whatever was going on. We're in the meeting, 10:15, I think. Knock on the door. So I got up, and I opened the top half of the Dutch door, and I said, hi. Hi, I have to talk to Vera. I really have to talk to Vera. And I said, okay, well, you need to come back, because I'm in a meeting with her now. She'll be ready. She'll be ready for you in a half an hour. She was insistent about it. I said, Sally, look, I really got to get this, we got to get stuff done, because it was right at the point where we just got this whole deficiency notice, so we're trying to get things done. And she was standing probably 3 feet back from the door in a walker, and I said, look, why don't you come back in a half an hour? There's plenty, you can talk to Vera then. Vera was standing 3 feet from me and never said a word. We had a standing meeting. She didn't help intervene. She didn't say, Sally, come back, whatever. Those are the two situations. Now, was my behavior outlandish at the point where I screamed at Vera? You bet. Not the substance, but the tone. I went back the next day. I apologized. I told her I was sorry. And that was in June. Okay? The other thing happened, I think, at the end of June. The only time I start to hear about things is in the beginning of November. In reference to the Lubert incident, I categorically deny that I ever ran her into anything. Her recollection of the event is suspect at best. When we were standing in the hall, Jim was getting copies made. And I turned to Jim and I said, probably from this far distance, I said, Jim, did you let Tina know so she can let her boss know? I would hate that this would have to come out in the paper before her boss knew. And from the hallway, you can't do that. It's a public document. You can't do that. Michelle is telling me, and I turned to her, I said, I'm not talking to you, Michelle. She continued to repeat that. It's a public document. Everybody has a right to it. I said, Michelle, I am not talking to you. At the other point, I pivoted and looked at Jim, and he said, I got it. I've already told her. I said, great. I never said not to pass them out. And she's absolutely right. Both reporters are using whatever reporter's privilege is. My suggestion to this board is, if I had assaulted her, maybe not the Eagle, but the Record would have had it as a front page piece of news. And it wasn't. There's a lot of history. Miss Lubert wanted a raise. She resigned a week before her 6-month review. That's when that was going to happen. And it was, we extrapolated that in the April meeting. We said, we're not going to do any raises until you go through a performance review at the end of 6 months. The resignation letter, which was attached to that complaint, I never saw until a week ago. It lays out the financial issues. That's what her complaint was. What I said to her in the hallway is, Michelle, you didn't help with not doing your job. And if you read the email from the fee accountant to the state, it absolutely states that exact thing. I didn't make that up. That's what I got from the fee accountant. The other thing that I made her life a living hell, I was the board chair. I was there a week, an hour, maybe a week when she was there. So I don't understand living hell, that how I could do that. If you read what says in that email from the fee accountant, the friction was not between myself and Michelle, although that's maybe the way she wants to put it. Who it was between was her and Vera, if you read that email, because Sue had observed that. She resigned 1 week before her probationary period ended. Her issues aren't with me, as that email will spell out. My interaction with Vera was not something I would want to repeat. I apologized, but it was not for the substance, but for the tone. This housing authority, we are in a much better place than we were. I'm not going to get into all these other ancillary incidents. It's really hard to respond to this, she did this, or Screen did this, and then 80 people signed it. When we met with the state, I took a petition that I had circulated, that Marlene had circulated, that I had her circulate, that said, we really like Vera. And when I handed it to Laura Taylor, who was the head of the HCD, she said, Karen, we're not concerned about what the tenant's like. We need certain things done. That's what our job as a board is. I am not there. That these instances, I cannot even respond. Some of your select board members, Mr. Abrams, I believe, was there for 4 or 5 meetings. Did you say that's accurate, Ed?
Yeah.
Mr. Cook was there for 1 or 2. I didn't spend a lot of time with tenants. I was told that I shouldn't spend time with tenants by Ms. Kozlowski. She said I shouldn't interact with people and that I shouldn't do this and micromanage. Part of the problems that we had is things were not getting done, and they needed to get done. And that's what I did. But this blanket statement that I don't have any compassion or whatever, I object to it totally. You know, I've lived in this community 40 years. Is my style perfect? Absolutely not. I am direct, and I'll not apologize for it. I did apologize to Vera the next day. And I'm sorry about how uncomfortable this is for all involved. But the way things have been presented, it's really hard to respond to somebody or something when it's secondhand, where you get information from somebody else or whatever. I can't respond with a broad brush or whatever else I'm supposedly being accused of. You have anything you want to ask me?
I think that's just okay.
Great.
Did you have any comments?
Do you have any
We have
questions?
no further witnesses, but I'd like to address the board now or after. So.
Okay, so let's have rebuttal first. What?
Yeah, first question from the board, then rebuttal, then conclude. Does the board have any questions of either the witnesses or Mr. Mahoney?
Yeah, Jim. Jim, can you come up to the microphone?
You talked about a list, I guess that's the same as the list of deficiencies that you got.
Yes,
Did that go to all the board members, all 4 of
every
them?
board member got it, and anyone that requested it from the state could get a copy of it as well.
And then through the door you heard, don't assault me?
You're not, yes.
Okay. That's it.
Anyone else on the board?
Okay, rebuttal.
First off, I would like a clarification, and I'm going to you about this. Ms. Lewis said that she was interviewed in February, March, yet I didn't leave until May, so I'm a little confused by that. I don't know whether the dates are just skewed or what.
Do you have the dates?
Yes, I have emails with me, and it was for a different position, the applications processing position.
Because as of the time I left, all applications were current, so I'm surprised by that. I was totally unaware, but it goes to the dysfunction of what was going on at the Housing Authority at the time. Mr. Mercer said he overheard me use the word, "don't assault me." I never stated that, and I'm more than happy to swear to that. Also, I met with Mr. Mercer February 16th with regard to another matter, and we began talking about the financial issues that was going on at the Housing Authority. As a matter of fact, things were getting worse, and I had set up an appointment with Mr. Mercer after that February 16th appointment. I went to his offices. I waited at least a half hour. He never showed up. I called him, and he was at one of his apartment buildings in Great Barrington. He did say, come to my apartment building if you want to talk, or call, and I sensed at that point that he wasn't interested in speaking. It may have been an assumption on my part, but I felt uncomfortable at that point. There's a lot of conversation regarding the fee accountant. That fee accountants through Honeycutt, Benton Ewald, would visit our offices on a monthly basis. So my first meeting with Sue probably was in November. By December, it was very clear there were issues. I was there at $15 a week, $15 an hour, I apologize. Yet, I was charged with trying to unravel the financial dilemma of the Great Barrington Housing Authority. As a matter of fact, in December, Ms. Honeycutt charged me with auditing 2017 payroll records, because nothing was making any sense to her. W-2s had to be run, and she wanted to make sure that the figures were correct. So here I was there less than a month, $15 an hour clerk, but I was charged with auditing payroll records. While I did that audit, I soon discovered that a pension payment to an employee of the Great Barrington Housing Authority had never been made, and it was several $1,000s. That opened up another can of worms. I don't think that would have been discovered unless I saw it through the audit. And as a matter of fact, I think that was just rectified this year. I do have recordings of meetings, and I actually listened to all of them. So I can't tell you the exact date that was rectified. Did I want to raise? I did. Because the previous administrative assistant made $16 an hour, and I had more qualifications. I went to Vera, I said, I think I should be raised to $16 an hour. I was told there is no money, there is no money, there is no money. As a matter of fact, the state of the Housing Authority, there wasn't a lot of money. And some of this was not the fault of the Housing Authority. It was delayed payments coming down from the state. So another issue that arose was the use of compensatory time. I did call wage hour, and the Great Barrington Housing Authority was not to use compensatory time, which they were doing as a matter of practice because they didn't have money to pay overtime. That resulted in one employee accruing a huge amount of time off that he couldn't take because short-staffed. So you can see how things have started to snowball. At no time was I told I was getting a 6-month performance review. This is news to me tonight. I didn't know anything about that. So obviously a ball got dropped there. One thing I can say, when I was hired, I never had a performance review the entire time I was there. If you look at the then personnel policy, after 90 days, I was supposed to have it. This was not even brought up. As a matter of fact, when I was hired, the state and federal documents that a new employee should be filling out were never given to me. I actually told the executive director, hey, I need to do an I-9. That's the law. Why do I know this? I had over 12 years experience as an HR administrator. So I knew what needed to be signed. Some of these comments tonight, I'm flabbergasted. And one thing I'm not really happy with someone saying I taunted Ms. Smith when being very involved in town government, that we must select our words carefully when the press is present, whether it's during a meeting or wherever you are. I simply said, be careful, Karen. And I looked over to the press. I was thinking the press was right there. That is what I did. I never said she assaulted me, but I could not get around her. She was right, my back was against the wall, and I'll swear to that as well. Unfortunately, I'm at a disadvantage. Reporters, for lack of better words, they'll hide behind reporter's privilege. And I know that gives them some rights to report the news, but at least people like me, unfortunately, flipping in the wind, especially when I can't have someone speak for me. Ms. Smith just made some comments about me, my conduct, my job performance. Yet I can't have someone speak for me. One thing I want to point out is the April meeting, April 18, 2018, I stayed behind. That meeting was at Brookside Manor. I stayed behind working with the auditors. The auditors from the DHCD had been in the office for several days. They came right out. They said, one of you needs to stay here because we're going to need this. We're going to need that. That's what auditors do. And I stayed there. As a matter of fact, I was told by one auditor that they saw a marked improvement during the time I was at the Housing Authority. But when this meeting was going on, I was trying to do the best job I could possibly do to help the Great Barrington Housing Authority. And for the record, I do take exception at some of the comments made here. And as a matter of fact, that DHCD audit, I received a copy of it. There were some inaccuracies in the audit, and I filed a rebuttal, a list of several issues they did not get straight with Laura Taylor of the DHCD. So, like I said, I have a binder here. I actually have 2 boxes of evidence at home. I have recordings of meetings that I listened to. And so I do know what I said and what I didn't say. I do know what happened and what didn't happen. I do know what goes on at the Great Barrington Housing Authority. So my only regret is nothing's under oath tonight. Thank you.
Any other rebuttal? Go ahead.
Jim Mercer said something about Thanksgiving. The board had nothing to do with that. I took care of that. I had surgery on November 20th, and before I went in the hospital, I made sure every person of the elderly at the Flag Rock was having a Thanksgiving meal. There's people in the room now that delivered those. Well, they're just like, one of them just like, that can contest it. I called them and asked them if they could do it. My daughter was going to fill in. They had nothing to do with it. You know? And as far as her behavior, everybody sees it every day. It's not just thrown out there in the air. We see it, we hear it. She was at the office every single day, door closed. So one of the tenants was supposed to go and get the research. There still haven't been done. Ask these guys over Dewey Court. Still not done. And it's been months and months. Why? Because they're not getting no work done. And it's not because the tenants are bothering them. They're just not doing it. That's all I got to say, but I'm sorry, I'm not letting them take the Thanksgiving thing. I worked my butt off for that one, and I enjoy doing it for them.
Any other rebuttals?
We have no rebuttal.
Do you have any other comments?
This is my opportunity to make my closing statement. Yes. Very much so. So we've heard a lot of testimony or a lot of evidence here today. I would suggest to you that it's eminently clear that there was nothing offered by either party to go to any complaint that rises to the very high standard that Section 6 of Chapter 121B requires for removal. I won't belabor the law because I know people don't like their lawyers throwing out all legal things, and frankly, your counsel did an excellent job articulating it. The phrase I think you got to keep in your mind is that there has to be a clear rule or duty that was articulated. And in my brief that I submitted to you, the federal court to give an estimate is because the danger of letting people be left with this stigma, that's the word the court used, with being removed from office without a clear articulation of a violation of a rule or duty is unfair. And if you could believe every single thing you heard from this side of the room, and it would still not rise to the level of withdrawal because there was never a clearly articulated rule or duty that was violated. And that is a prima facie deficiency with their case. I suggest that on the initial written filings that it wasn't even sufficient for a hearing, but that's what we're here and that's what we got. Now what we did hear is a lot of disputed issues about actually, it's not disputed that there's problems with the housing authority. We got everybody's versions of whose fault it is. But that's not before the board today. And that's not what's to be adjudicated. The sole thing to be adjudicated is her fitness to fulfill her obligation to the voters who put her in this office. It's whether she is so unfit for office that this board can substitute their judgment for that of the voters. It's a very high standard, a very dangerous standard to be playing. So I know you'll take that seriously. I will just briefly address the evidence. With regard to the Tenants Association, I think we heard some very honest and very earnest concerns. They've been articulated in the proper forum before and will continue to be. As I say, none of those, there was no articulated rules or violations of any kind. It's fine if they don't like Ms. Smith. Maybe they have justification not to like Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith admitted that she did raise her voice to a point where she felt the need to go apologize to the executive director. None of that falls in the gambit of this statute. And the courts have clearly said errors in judgment, when you're wrong, you did the wrong thing, an error in judgment, are not grounds for removal. And if she yelled at somebody, was discourteous, disrespectful, I started writing down all these characterizations, and then I stopped there for a while. Those are all, at best, errors of judgment, and they are not legal grounds for renewal. They're not legal grounds for you to strip the voters of their voice. The trickier evidentiary issues comes with the complaints of Ms. Blueberry. You heard 2 eyewitness accounts, none of whom corroborate these claims of being backed up against the wall. The burden lies with Ms. Blueberry to substantiate that a clear rule or duty was violated. She herself admits there wasn't an assault. It's not in her written complaints. When there was reference to that, she denies it. Maybe she was disrespected by Ms. Smith. That does not call, in fact, you have a constitutional right to be disrespectful. Let's not forget that. And I think there's a genuine dispute as to who was disrespectful to who, and that's the kind of thing we don't want. Frankly, Ms. LeBear got what she wanted tonight. An opportunity to do what she does so well. Assail people's integrity and recite her own resume over and over and over again. But none of that should even have been let into testimony here tonight. I respect the board's decision to try to give everyone a fair hearing, but none of it was germane to the requirements of the statute that clearly spelled out to you. Clear articulation of a rule or duty and substantial evidence, not some evidence, substantial evidence. At best, you have contradictory versions. You have no right at this point to strip the voters of their decision to have Ms. Smith serve on the board. And what should make you rest easy is she's on the ballot in a few months, 6 months. Respect the democratic process. I ask you to vote tonight to deny both petitions for her removal. Thank you.
Yeah, Michelle just wants to point out what she has to me before. She did not petition for her removal. She said any action that the board may take.
That's fair.
And also, if I may, not everyone knows what an MPA is. That's why I simply said I had a master's in public administration. I had written that letter to Steve as someone who already knew that. So I was not reciting my resume.
Jane, do you have a question?
The whole story hasn't been told because there are a lot of people that are under gag orders. So a lot of us know something that we can't state now. The only one thing I can say is there isn't one person in this group that aren't fine people and are standing up for Karen, and I would too, except none of you have been bullied by her. Tell me one person that's been bullied. We have been, and that's what this was supposed to be about. It wasn't about her job performance or her job performance. It was about bullying. And I have been an advocate for 60 years, and I am telling you, she bullied people, and that's all I can say.
Marlene?
Just like to say, how many times are you allowed to be a bully to people before you're considered a bully? I think one should be enough. No tolerance. They have it in schools, they're teaching everybody that. Why isn't it taught at the elderly housing and the family units? She didn't apologize the next day, it was 2 weeks later. You know, I mean, no stone is unturned at the house, and everybody knows everything over there pretty much. But I mean, you can't bully people. It's not right. And it is grounds. One time being a bully, it says it in the regulations. One time. Doesn't have to be 2, 20, 30. One time. She's a bully. A lot of people know it, so. They do the right thing. I'm not an attorney, so.
You want to review the roles more at this point?
Mr. Chair, at your request, I'll repeat and speak to the standard that I mentioned.
Louder, please.
Yes, speak up.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, the board, based on the evidence that is before it, and it relates to the charges, in order to approve the removal in this instance, it would need to find, based on substantial evidence, that, as was stated and as I stated at the outset, there was a violation of the rule or duty, which again could include a statute, bylaw, or regulation. I don't believe there was reference to that this evening, but I point that out that rule or duty has a broader meaning than just those two simple words. The courts have said that the misconduct must be significant and not just substantial or trivial, and I'm not characterizing anything that anyone has said this evening. I'm just repeating the standard. And it must relate to the administration of the public office in question, which here is membership on the Housing Authority. The Supreme Judicial Court has said that errors of judgment are not to be construed as misconduct in office. I'll repeat again with respect to the scope of actions that this board may take. There's nothing in the statute that says, other than removal, the board may do X or Y. But it is my opinion that if you don't find basis to vote for removal, that you could state record or make a comment, same as you would do with any other meeting where an issue within your purview as the executive of the town and a matter of public policy either moves you or requires you to do so. I'd like to make one point, since there might be a question about it. Attorney Tahomey submitted at the outset this email dated March 30, 2018 from Sue Honeycutt. He presented that to describe the context of the environment and issues at the Housing Authority in the time in question. And my instruction to you is that's the purpose for which it should be considered. And I don't think we've gone beyond that, but there were questions about the particular competency or performance of individuals. But this document, in my view, is only for the purpose of providing context of issues and the tenor of discussions or the state of the Housing Authority at the time in question. This board is not here to determine particularities of performance with respect to either an audit or other financial duties that are required or performed. So the short version of that is this has a very limited purpose, and that's just to provide context.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Clearly, this is not what absurd happens, but if a housing authority board member were to actually strike somebody, is that a violation of rule or duty by statute, bylaw, or regulation? It's had nothing to do with her.
There are both civil rules and criminal statutes regarding the unconsented to touching of one person by another. The evidence tonight, as I have heard it, does not address that there was a crime committed. If there were a crime committed, it would be a violation of a statute in the carrying out of a person's office. That would implicate the rule or duty issue.
But it would have to rise to crime.
Well, as you described,
right.
It would have to be a violation of some set standard, and scenario that you posited would most likely be a criminal act, unauthorized touching of another person.
So as a board, we have two decisions tonight. One is, and I'm highly not recommending this, we do not have to come to a decision tonight. I'm highly recommending that we do what this chapter behind both us, the Housing Authority, tenants, Ms. Smith, that this isn't going to get any easier more murky than it was at 6:10. And, but it is a board decision. I don't hear anyone object to coming up with a decision tonight. We'll move ahead with our deliberations. So, we've taken our testimony, we've asked our questions. It's now time for us to deliberate. So, whoever would like to start this.
I don't mind. I suppose when I'm finished, we can work our way down. I walked in here with the view that the will of the voters is really a huge thing for any group to overturn, and there is an election soon. It was the definition of what we're allowed to look at. I think tied our hands from doing much from the beginning. Abusive behavior, it sounds like does not rise to this. I have been bullied by Ms. Smith in the course of a board that we both sat on, and it is unpleasant. And I have seen at other boards, I would hope there's a change in behavior, but I don't know that rises to something we can take her off the board for, and like the board. And I have seen the bullying, and I hope this whole process changes that. But I don't think we have the right to overturn the voters. And there is an election in 6 months. The only other thing I could just wait to say, but I think you owe Michelle an apology for that attack on her personally. It's not easy to stand here and make these charges. And that was sort of a personal attack, not to what was said. That's an aside. So I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion.
I think let us speak first. If people want to, I do want to speak, but sorry.
I mean, given the very narrow criteria we have to work with, I don't see that this conduct rises to the level of misconduct in office that we have to think about.
Louder, please, Bill.
It doesn't seem to meet the standard for misconduct, is what I'm saying, given how the statute describes misconduct.
I don't think anybody on this board has a question, or even questions, in fact, that the housing authority has been in a lot of trouble for a long time. And believe me, one of the reasons why we sat down a little over a year ago to appoint a new board was because we saw that something needed to change. You guys deserve something better up there, obviously. There's a gamut of things, but unfortunately, that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss actions of one person, and I think I'm just reiterating what both Bill and Ed just said, was that we are under a very narrow window of what we can rule on. There's obviously some personality conflicts. And I just don't know if we have enough legal authority to say that we can remove somebody if there wasn't a clear rule or duty.
No, thank you. I have a couple of things to say, and I'll take Kate off the hook. First, there was some testimony that I was asked to call the Tenants Association union rep, who I didn't know what his title was. I did actually call him, got his voicemail, found out his title, and realized that I was going to end up calling Mr. Dineski anyways to find out about this chapter. And Vera did give me the law, but I'm Marlene, I'm sorry. did give me that, and I appreciate that, but I did call Mr. Dineski instead of calling him because I figured I was gonna have to substantiate what was told to me anyway, so why not just go to the beginning? So she is accurate, she did give me that, I never spoke to anyone, and so Marlene is correct on that. If anyone knows me, I don't tolerate bullying, I don't tolerate rude behavior. One of the ways that I run a meeting is that everyone can be respectful, and I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. There can be no room for disrespect. There can be disagreement without disrespect. And I understand that when you're under stress, things happen. Any of us who would say that we've never disrespected anyone, or hope most of us didn't bully, but probably none of us can stand up to that. I came into this meeting, and I know many people thought I had a conflict, and I think we all had a conflict in Great Barrington with many of the people in town, many of the prominent people. We all have a conflict, whether it's Sharon Gregory, Holly, and we all know each other. We've all served on boards together. And I came in with an open mind because I was a little angry and still am, because I don't think that this is the right, I don't think it's right to bully. I don't think it's right to raise your voice or anything else. But I also understand that what I wrote down was errors of judgment cannot be used for removal from office. I think there were some errors of judgment here, errors that I would not be proud of if it was me. I think that the law from the beginning is odd, that elected official can be removed by the select board for the housing authority. Usually it's a recall of ballot, and why for this position it's this way. But then they give us a standard that it's almost impossible to remove someone. I mean, obviously you could remove someone who was derelict of duty, someone who stole. None of these are the allegations tonight. So it puts us between a rock and a hard place. We're uncomfortable because we want the tenants to feel comfortable with who is up there in their position. And, but clearly, hearing from Mr. Dineski, at least in my opinion, it doesn't rise to that level. So that's going to be my vote. It was something I was sure I came in with an open mind, and I was really hoping one way or another to be swayed. To be honest with you, there's so much he said, she said with this and not being there, it's difficult anyways. I'm not disputing anyone's statement. Everyone, I think, came in here with the intention of telling the truth, and I think everyone did. As time passes and as emotions rise, who knows? I sometimes have had things that I thought one thing happened and other people told me that's not what happened. I still think that's what happened, and I still think I'm right. So, I'm not apologizing for how I'm going to vote, but I'm not comfortable with this whole proceeding because I don't think there's all losers in this proceeding. I absolutely understand that. Anyone else on the board?
Yeah, I was just reading again. It says the misconduct in office must be significant rather than unsubstantial or trivial. Well, I don't think it's unsubstantial or trivial. I think it's serious. And we should think about it long and hard. But I also don't think that there's any particular rule or duty of the administration of public office that's been broken here. There's maybe some rules of respect that have been broken here, but we can't remove someone from office for that.
So can I just get some, I'm sorry. We can only vote to remove or not to. That's
the only formal disciplinary or sanction type action you can take is removal. There's no provision otherwise in the statute.
Suspension?
If you don't make a motion to do anything.
Well, you should, in my view, make a motion because I think you need to conclude the proceeding, and that motion can be either affirmative affirmative or a negative on that question of removal.
Okay, and once that's done, then we can make suggestions, is that what?
After you've taken the vote, sure, depending on the outcome, or regardless of the outcome, you can make a statement.
My preference, since we were asked to remove, would be to make a motion to get a second to remove.
We only had,
Right.
just so Michelle, only one of the requests was to remove, one was to take any action that we felt appropriate.
Right.
Such as a record.
Right. Which we can. So I will make a motion that we, for the sake of discussion, that we remove Karen Smith from the Housing Authority Board.
Second.
The discussion.
We will discuss it.
That we will. I just want to make sure everybody, you know, we don't have the ability to reprimand, but I think all of us who've spoken have said that, you know, we wish there was not an atmosphere there that was to the level that it is. That it's not good for the people who live there. So that's not an official reprimand, okay?
May I extend that to our community at large? That I think that this is an example that needs to be, or this hearing, this conversation of bullying, of raising your voice, having an error of judgment is something we see on other boards, we see it with other town officials, we see it within our community. And not only should this be a lesson to Karen, but a lesson to all of us that we need to do a better job at our own errors of judgment.
Yeah, I don't want this, and I agree, okay, I don't want this message, if the vote is as it appears to be, I don't want the message that the Board of Selectmen condones bullying, condones raising the voice, or condones behavior that is not becoming of an elected official or appointed official or a citizen of this town.
Right.
I think that's really important, and that may be the message that some people take away from this, but it's the incorrect message.
I think that's what all of us have struggled with in thinking and the emotions of this.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? Aye. So it's unanimous not to remove. Yes, ma'am.
So my suggestion,
Yes.
if I may, now that we've got that
Yeah, please.
would be to the housing authority, and I don't know their policies and procedures, but is it possible for them to take another vote to remove Karen as chairman?
You can suggest that and leave that up to the housing authority members are all here, so they will hear you.
That's my suggestion. Would be to at your next meeting, if you feel strongly that Karen's not doing her job, or if you do not want her as chairman, take that vote at the board.
It's not gonna matter because they go with what she says.
So the other thing that I would recommend, and in the same area which may make a difference, and Dan, I agree with your opinion, is that I would strongly suggest that the housing authority and the tenants hold an open forum, get someone to facilitate it, and see if we can change the toxic atmosphere, because that's no way to live. And I think that's doable, and I think everyone needs to be able to speak with a facilitator there to moderate it and see if we can come to some. I'm sure Ms. Smith doesn't want that atmosphere, none of the tenants want it, and we need to move on from this. And so I would strongly suggest that the Tenants Association work with the Housing Authority, and I would be glad to volunteer myself or anyone else, not to facilitate, but to help you get this organized and see if we can move on from this, because it's not going to do anybody any good to continue this festering. Anyone else on the board? Citizen speak time. We don't have media time on here, but tradition is big, so. No media time, a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.